My in-laws always tell me I don't belong in their family because I didn't go to college. So I hosted a celebration dinner in my new restaurant, and their faces dropped when they saw who was catering. "Wait, you own this place," my sister-in-law gasped. They walked into the restaurant like they always did, chin high, eyes sharp, lips curled in polite little smiles that never reached their eyes. My husband's mother, Brenda, looked around the dining room with the air of a woman inspecting a house she might buy, if the wallpaper could be replaced. My sister-in-law, Clarissa, wore a dress so stiff it could stand on its own, and an expression that said she still couldn't believe she had to spend her evening in a place she hadn't personally approved. And then Marcus came in behind them, looking down at his phone, as if all this wasn't about to slap him square in the face. They didn't know. They had no idea whose restaurant they were in. They thought I had connections, thought I could arrange a cute dinner for Brenda's birthday, maybe as a peace offering. What they didn't know, what they never cared to ask, was that this place, this entire restaurant from the tiles on the floor to the menu in their hands, was mine. Mine because I had worked for it when they were all busy pretending I wasn't good enough to carry their last name. Clarissa looked up from the bread basket as the first course arrived, house-made fig jam on seared crostini with whipped cheddar, and caught me walking by, clipboard in hand. Her fork hovered in midair. "Wait," she said, eyes narrowing. "You work here?" I stopped beside their table, looked right at her and said, clear and calm, "No, Clarissa. I own this place." The silence that followed was so heavy I swear it made the candles flicker. It started almost 10 years ago, when I met Marcus at a fall festival in Asheville. I was helping run the pie stand for a local bakery I worked at. He was there with a group of friends from his firm. He looked uncomfortable, like he didn't quite know what to do in his khakis and spotless sneakers, but he smiled when I handed him a slice of bourbon pecan pie. That smile was disarming. He was sweet, thoughtful, and honestly, back then I liked how quiet he was. He asked me out a week later. When I met his family, it was like walking into a country club where I hadn't paid the membership fee. Brenda greeted me like a hotel manager, smiling, stiff, all surface-level charm. Wallace, his father, shook my hand like I was a vendor. And Clarissa didn't say much at first. She just watched me with this amused expression, like she was waiting for me to slip up and spill something on the carpet. At the end of that first dinner, Brenda told Marcus, right in front of me, that she was glad he was just having fun and that these phases pass. I was 29. I'd been cooking professionally for over a decade. I didn't have a college degree. They never let me forget it. In the beginning, Marcus defended me, or at least I thought he did. He'd say, "They just don't know you yet," or give them time. And I gave them time, years of time. I showed up for holiday dinners, wore the right clothes, smiled through their little jabs. Once, Brenda asked me at Christmas if I'd ever thought about doing something with myself, like I wasn't already working 50-hour weeks. Clarissa said she'd read somewhere that women in kitchens only cook because they can't hack it in the real world. I laughed and said, "You mean the world where you manage your husband's calendar and call that a job?" That was the first time Marcus didn't laugh with me. Still, I tried. I baked for their charity auctions. I catered Clarissa's baby shower. I helped Brenda reorganize her pantry. They took everything I gave and looked for reasons to call it not enough. But the real divide came when I decided to open my own catering business. I started small, working out of a shared kitchen with a few other local chefs. Marcus said he was proud of me, but I saw the way he shifted when I told people I had my own business. Like he wasn't sure if it was something to be proud of or just tolerated. Still, I pushed forward. Booked weddings, events, retirement parties. Built a reputation. 3 years in, I stumbled across a rundown little restaurant for rent on Lexington Avenue. It had good bones, a beautiful brick wall, big windows, a worn charm you couldn't fake. I scraped together every dollar I had, took out a business loan under my name, and signed the lease. It was the biggest risk I'd ever taken. That's when Marcus changed. At first, it was small things. He'd ask why I couldn't come home earlier. He'd make comments about how everything in our lives is about food now. When I told him I couldn't make his niece's ballet recital because I had a wedding to cater, he didn't even hide his disappointment. He started sleeping in the guest room sometimes and said he was just exhausted. Then one night, out of nowhere, he said, "I think we need space." I asked, "Space from what?" He just looked at me and said, "From this version of us." I moved into the tiny apartment above the restaurant. It wasn't glamorous. It had a leaky ceiling and a kitchen sink that backed up weakly. But it was mine. Every day I was downstairs scrubbing grease traps, building menus, managing staff. I worked 14-hour days and loved every miserable minute of it. The restaurant, Juniper and Sage, opened to a full house on our first weekend. I still remember plating the lamb shank that night, looking out over a packed dining room, and thinking, this is what all those years were for. The late shifts, the side eyes, the humiliation, this moment. Marcus stopped by once 6 weeks after we opened. He looked around like he didn't recognize me. I offered him a coffee and he said, "You really did it." "I did," I said. He left without finishing his coffee. Then, 2 months later, he called. "Mom's birthday dinner is coming up. Clarissa forgot to book a venue. I know it's last minute, but could you help?" "Sure," I said calmly. "I know just the place." I didn't tell him it was mine. I didn't say the name. I just said I could get them a private room with full service, a custom menu, and local wine pairings. When they arrived, I let the staff handle seating them. I stayed back. I watched them from the office security feed for a few minutes. Brenda looked around the dining room like she was assessing whether it would pass a health inspection. Clarissa was scrolling through her phone. Wallace was already complaining about the parking. I walked out to greet them about 5 minutes later, in a simple navy wrap dress and low heels. No apron, no clipboard. Clarissa looked up, eyes narrowing, fork hovering over a crostini. "Wait, you work here?" I smiled. "No, Clarissa, I own this place." Her jaw actually dropped. Brenda blinked rapidly. Wallace put down his wine glass. I stayed at their table just long enough to enjoy the silence. The silence was thick. Brenda glanced at Marcus like maybe this was some elaborate prank they'd all been roped into. Clarissa actually pushed her chair back a little, like she needed to reevaluate everything from her seating position. And Marcus, he just looked at me, then around the room and back to me again. I saw something flicker in his expression. Not pride. Not exactly. More like disbelief, maybe a little guilt, and something else I couldn't quite name. I turned to the server, a young woman named Kalani who'd been with me since opening day. "Please continue with the next course," I said with a smile. "And make sure the Rhodes party gets a fresh pour of the Lodi Zinfandel." Clarissa flinched. She knew wine, and she knew I did too. As I walked away, I didn't look back. I went to the kitchen, checked on the duck breast searing in the pans, double-checked plating for the warm beet salad with goat cheese mousse, and asked Louis, my sous chef, to prepare for dessert a little earlier. I wanted everything to be perfect, not for them, but for me. For every time they'd smirked at my career. For every dinner I'd spent swallowing my own words to keep the peace. It's a strange feeling, watching people who have always looked down on you slowly realize they've misjudged you. The night carried on with brittle small talk at their table. I noticed how Clarissa kept looking toward the kitchen doors, then back at her plate like she was trying to understand how a woman with no degree, no real career path, had made something this beautiful. Marcus followed me into the hallway at one point. I was reviewing the checklists on my clipboard. "Nora," he said quietly, "why didn't you tell me?" I shrugged. "You never asked." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You made this place?" "With my own hands," I said, keeping my voice even. "With every dime I saved, every holiday I missed, every catering job I took because you said we needed more stability. This is what I was doing while you were deciding if I was still your version of a wife." He didn't have a response. He just stood there like the floor might give out beneath him. Back at the table, Brenda had softened. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the food. Maybe it was just an embarrassment. She said something to the server about the duck being divine and asked who had developed the menu. When Kalani said it was mine, I could see Brenda's mouth twitch like she didn't know if she was supposed to be impressed or insulted. Clarissa didn't say much. She just picked at her plate, her jaw tight, her shoulders stiff. I had to admit, I enjoyed watching her struggle to find a way to insult a meal that was clearly better than anything she'd ever been served at her country club fundraisers. When dessert came, a trio of miniature pastries, including a lavender honey tart that had become something of a house signature, I personally walked it to the table. "Compliments of the chef," I said smoothly, placing the tray down. Brenda nodded. "This is impressive, Nora." I tilted my head. "Thank you." Wallace finally cleared his throat. "So you're running the whole thing, full ownership." I met his eyes. Yes, I am the executive chef and the owner. I also handle most of the business operations. We're fully booked through next month, if you're wondering. Clarissa blinked, still silent. Marcus looked at me again, and this time there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen in a long time: regret. I remember when you said you wanted this, he said, voice low. Back when we were just talking in the yard after one of your weddings, I guess I didn't think that I'd actually do it. I finished for him. He nodded. I didn't answer. There wasn't anything left to say. I walked away again, letting them eat in the restaurant they never imagined I could build. Every wall in that place was painted with sweat, doubt, and grit. The exposed brick wasn't just aesthetic. It was a reminder that real things are built with time and struggle. And that night, they were sitting in the middle of everything they said I couldn't have. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of service. I checked on other tables, helped in the kitchen, and ran payment processing. The restaurant hummed like a living thing, a symphony of movement and warmth. Laughter echoed from the bar. A couple in the corner clinked glasses. Staff moved with confidence and care, each one proud of their role. But I kept an eye on that table. I noticed how Brenda began to soften a bit, even smiling at the server. Clarissa stayed guarded, but the kind of guardedness that comes from being shaken, from feeling your foundation shift and trying to rebuild it fast. Marcus was the only one who kept looking at me like he wanted to say something more. Like the words were building in his throat but never quite making it out. When they finally stood to leave, I came over again. Brenda touched my arm gently. Thank you, Nora. This was beyond anything I expected. I nodded. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Clarissa just said, good night. Her voice was tight, maybe even bitter, but she said it. Marcus lingered behind. I was wiping down the host's stand. Nora, he said again. Really? I'm proud of you. I gave him a tired smile. I didn't do it for your pride, Marcus. He nodded like he understood that too late. The door closed behind them, and I turned back to the kitchen, where the real work always waits. Back in the kitchen, Louis handed me a rag and a look. So, that was them, he asked. I nodded, smiling faintly. That was them. He shook his head, laughing under his breath. They didn't see it coming. I wiped down the counter slowly, breathing in the lingering scent of roasted garlic and lemon zest, still hearing the echo of forks scraping clean plates in the dining room. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had anything left to prove. Not to Marcus, not to his parents, not to Clarissa. The validation I used to chase like oxygen now sat in the satisfied hum of my staff, the warmth of the dining room, the bookings on our calendar, and the dignity of building something real. Later that night, after the restaurant closed and the last glass was polished, I went upstairs to my apartment above Juniper and Sage. I sat on the little balcony with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the quiet shuffle of downtown Asheville below. The street lamps lit the sidewalk in warm pools of amber. A couple passed by, hand in hand, laughing softly. Somewhere someone played guitar. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Tonight was beautiful. I'm sorry for everything. You deserve more than I ever gave you. I stared at the screen for a while, then I turned it face down on the table. I didn't reply. A week later, Brenda reached out. She asked if we could meet for coffee. Out of curiosity, and maybe a hint of closure, I agreed. We sat at a small table at Old Europe Pastries in Lexington, just a few blocks from my restaurant. She ordered a cappuccino, and I went with black coffee. She didn't waste time. I was wrong about you, she said. I know, I said calmly. She blinked. You were always polite, always gracious. You never threw it back at us, even when we deserved it. I learned early on not to expect much, I replied, my voice even but not cruel. And I figured if I just kept my head down and worked hard enough, maybe one day that would change. And it did, she said, almost in awe. No, Brenda, you changed, I said. I've always been this. You just finally looked close enough. She looked down into her cappuccino, nodded. Fair enough. She told me she was proud of me. She didn't ask for forgiveness. I respected her for that. Word about Juniper, and Sage spread fast after the dinner. Asheville's small, and when people talk, they talk loud. We got a second article in the Citizen Times, this time with photos. Clarissa's friend group found out through the grapevine. Suddenly, I had people coming in just to meet the self-made woman who catered her in-laws' fancy dinner without them realizing it was her place. I didn't try to be petty. I didn't gloat. I just kept running the restaurant. But the revenge, That quiet, satisfying kind that doesn't need cruelty, was watching them have to swallow the truth. I was never beneath them. They were just too small to see me clearly. A few months later, I heard that Marcus had tried to patch things up with me through Brenda. He'd mentioned rekindling, maybe starting fresh. I smiled when she said it, not cruelly, just peacefully. No, I told her. That chapter's closed. I didn't need a man who only saw my worth when it was plated with duck confit and lavender tarts. I moved forward. I hired 2 more full-time kitchen staff. I began mentoring young chefs, especially women, who, like me, had been told they weren't enough without a degree or a last name that meant something. I started offering monthly chef's tables, where I sat with the guests and told stories behind the recipes. Those nights sold out the fastest. People wanted to hear about the woman who built her dream over a decade of dishwashing, catering gigs, and cold shoulders. One night after service, Kalani asked me, "Do you ever wish things had been different? Like with your ex in them?" I paused, drying my hands on a dish towel. "No," I said. "If they hadn't tried to make me feel small, I might never have worked this hard to grow big." It was true. They gave me something no degree or pedigree could offer, a clear view of what I didn't want to become, and the drive to become something better. In the end, I didn't burn bridges. I let them walk themselves off, one cold comment at a time. And I stood back, built a whole damn restaurant where those bridges used to be. So, to anyone out there hearing whispers that you don't belong, or feeling the cold shoulder of people who think they're better than you, build your dream anyway. Build it quiet, build it proud, and one day they'll sit at your table, forks in hand, disbelief in their eyes, and you won't even need to say, "I told you so." They'll taste it. And that will be enough.